Coral photo class, day 2, well capacity. So, simply put, your well capacity is essentially the maximum amount of trapped electrons that you can have in your electron well. Um, Basically, once that electron well is full, you approach something called saturation. Saturation is essentially a term for the probability of trapping a new electron, and as you approach saturation, your probability of trapping a new electron approaches zero. This well capacity, which I have drawn in red, is generally proportional to your photosite area. So your photosite area, which we covered yesterday, is essentially the square area usually termed as pixel pitch, usually in microns. That determines the surface area of your photosite. So I've drawn a couple examples here on a graph. We can see that based on pixel size, you can have, say, 4.25 microns, and that would be a well capacity of, just as an example, approximately 12,000 electrons. And then you could have a 6.5 micron, which would be a well capacity of approximately 45,000 electrons, which we can see is a difference in well capacity from the 4.25 micron photosite of about 3.8 times. And we could go up to 11 microns, which would be 80,000 electrons and 6.3 times, and up to 20 microns for a photosite, and that would be 200,000 electrons, which is 16.66 times the electrons. So what does this all mean? Well, essentially, the more electrons you can collect, the greater your well capacity, and the more potential you have to gather not blown out data. And when I say that, I mean essentially that you're maximizing your dynamic range. Your dynamic range is essentially some combination of this electron well and your analog to digital converter working in tandem as best as possible. So the ADC, the analog to digital converter, is charged, no pun intended, but it is a nice pun, with mapping the voltage in each well to a digital value, which we know is an ADU, which is an analog to digital unit. So the ADU value then serves as a marker within a predetermined range of values, which is determined as your bit depth. Your bit depth, and I didn't draw it here, but I did make a table, is something that you should just think of as binary digit depth. If you didn't know, bit is short for binary digit. Binary, if you didn't know, operates on the concept of the power of 2. So if you think of a coin flip, and then you take another coin flip, your first coin flip was 2 to the power of 1, so there were 2 possibilities. And your second coin flip had 2 to the power of 2 possibilities, so it would be 4, and so on. And that's how you can read binary. So 0 would be 0, and 1 would be 1, and 0, 1 is 3, but I think, I don't know. Anyway, moving on, because I'm thinking about this right now instead. Each bit in your bit depth essentially doubles your previous bit voltage maximum, or your maximum voltage that's possible in the electron well before you hit your well capacity, and you approach something called saturation, which is again when that full dynamic range is filled. So I just made an interesting table here, which it's got specific phones or cameras and the ADC, number of bits, and the camera sensor, and the possible number of values that you have within there. So just as an example, here's a Pixel 8 Pro 2023 model. It's a 10-bit analog to digital conversion on a Samsung ISOCELL GN1 sensor. That's going to give you 1,025 different values in terms of gradients. So basically what it's saying, when it gets all these electrons, whether it's 12,000 or 200,000, it says, well, make your best round up on a scale of 0 to 1,024, how full that is. So if you had 200,000 electrons, you'd be at 1,024. If you had 0 electrons, you'd be at 0. So now we go down to, say, like this older model DSLR, the Canon M50. That's a 2018 release. It actually has 14-bit. So instead of the typical 1025, we can go up all up to 16,385 different values. So now, let's just say as an example that it has a pixel size, and I know it doesn't, but let's just say it does have a pixel size of 20 microns and it does have a wall capacity of 200,000 electrons. Then let's say when it's asked to make this conversion, instead of saying, hey, pick a number between 0 and 1024 as how full you are, it can say, hey, pick a value between 0 and 16,384, how full you are. And then that'll obviously determine it out into a gradient, which I didn't write it down here, but the human eye is not linear in how it views light. It's logarithmic in how it views light. The bit depth is also victim to this thing called read noise, which is essentially the stray electricity or the electricity that it takes for the system to read the sensor and get a value off of it. There's some ways around this that we'll talk about later, but for now, just know that if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Next time, I think we're going to cover ISO, so we're basically going to cover dynamic range and gain, and I might cover saturation structures, so essentially like anti-bloom structures, but that seems just beyond the scope of this. I'm going to try and keep it simple for everybody, but just know that if you have to shoot something, you have limited light, higher bit ADC is going to be better. You're going to get better results with a DLSR just based on these results. And that's because I'm going to show you how to take the read noise out of your photos later on. So stay tuned, and hopefully you learned something interesting today. Have a good day.